All right, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at Gregor Mendel. Now, he's known as the father of genetics. He was born back in 1822, so a long time ago compared to present day. And he was oftentimes spending his many hours in the garden. Now, not only did he love working in the garden, but he loved science. And when he was working in his garden, he made many observations. He noticed that some plants were tall and some plants were short. He noticed that some of the pea plant seeds, they had wrinkle seeds, and some were really smooth seeds. And he also noticed that some of the plants had purple flowers and some of the pea plants had white flowers. And he started to wonder if these are what the plants look like. I wonder what their parents look like. And I wonder what the kids' offsprings would look like. So if we took two plants and let them and cross-pollinated them, what would their offspring look like? What would the babies look like? And so he decided to do an experiment. And he took a purple pea plant and he cross-pollinated it with a white pea plant, and that started his experiment. And so here is the purple pea plant that he took and the white pea plant, and he cross-pollinated them, meaning he went ahead and took the pollen from one and put it on the female part of the other so that they would go ahead and mate. And as a result, when he went ahead and planted then those seeds that he got from those two cross-pollinating plants, he planted those seeds and he noticed that all of the offspring looked like just one of the parents. They were all purple. And that got him to start thinking, what happened to the white pea plant? Why did none of the offspring or none of the baby plants that grew up look like the white parent? And so this got him to start thinking about doing some more experimenting. So here's his second experiment. This right here is his first. And so what he decided to do is he took two of these plants that were, they both had a purple parent and a white parent. So he took these two plants and cross-pollinated them. So they ended up having these kids right here. And he noticed that there was a general ratio that 3 out of the 4 plants would be purple and 1 out of the 4 plants would be white. And he started to think, well, wait a minute. This plant right here, the white one, doesn't look anything like the parents. How did that come about? How did the white plant all of a sudden show up again? And so this got him to start thinking about how there must be something inside these plants that gets passed down from one generation to the next. And so this was his discovery of the idea about an inheritable trait that's passed down. All right, so we're going to go ahead and fast forward what we know today. We learned in class that those traits that we were talking about with Mendel being passed down that are controlled by genes. And no, we're not talking about Gene from Wreck-It Ralph or Gene Simmons at all. We're talking about genes that are found on chromosomes. So these genes that are found on chromosomes are small sections of the DNA that control a trait. And so we've kind of defined that in class today, but I want to make sure we kind of refresh our memory and review that these genes are really just sections of DNA that control the trait. And oftentimes we have variations of these genes. There's not usually just one gene that goes ahead and determines a trait. We usually have variations of these genes, and we're going to call those alleles. All right, so these alleles, we often have learned in class, can be either dominant or recessive, just like what Mendel discovered. And so to help us understand and determine and kind of be able to see which ones are dominant and recessive, we use letters to represent those alleles. So dominant alleles are represented by capital letters. So in this case, capital P stands for the dominant allele or dominant trait, which is purple. And then the recessive, which is the white flower, is going to be represented by a lowercase p. Now, so you can see here on our lovely drawing from Mendel's experiment, here we have a pea plant. It has both a dominant and a recessive allele, but again, the reason why we see purple is because it has a dominant allele. And so that dominant allele overpowers and it is expressed, and so that's what we see. And the only time we see the recessive trait is when there's two recessive alleles. And so therefore, this white flower can only be expressed, because that's the recessive allele, when there's no purple or dominant traits present. So the only time we see the actual white flower color show up is when it has the recessive alleles. The other thing we can take away from this little experiment what Mendel created is that we want to make sure we understand that we have sometimes what are called purebreds, and we have sometimes we have plants that are called, or organisms or traits that are called hybrids. And so a purebred is when you have the same alleles. So notice we have a big P here and a big P here. So two dominant alleles. That is a purebred purple plant because they have the same type of allele. And this right over here is a white purebred plant because, again, they have the same alleles. However, sometimes you're going to have alleles that have one dominant and one recessive. And that's considered a hybrid, meaning it has different alleles. And so this particular plant is a hybrid, and this particular plant is a hybrid. Now, we'll eventually learn another word for that, but we'll save that for another video.